Hello, welcome to the EPG Pathshala program in linguistics. I am Pramod Pandey, Center for Linguistics, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Today we will discuss Module 22, which is a continuation of Module 21. Both the modules deal with types of phonological processes. In the last module, we saw that phonological processes can be broadly classified into two types: whole segment types and modification types. Modification types in turn are of many other types of processes that involve in them specific types. So we looked at co-occurrence type, co-articulation type, and now we will continue to discuss some of these processes of modification type. We will begin with transitional type of modification processes. These are three in number, namely on-gliding, off-gliding, and consonant insertion. On-gliding takes place when a glide is inserted before a vowel. For example, in some languages, such as Kashmiri, if a word begins with a certain vowel, then a glide is inserted. In Kashmiri, if a word begins with an E vowel, then the glide here is inserted. As you can see the examples. Imtihan is pronounced Yimtihan, Eid is pronounced Yeed, etc. Off glide is the opposite of on glide, when a glide is inserted after a vowel. This is found in languages such as Kashmiri, where before a palatalized consonant, the preceding vowel is off-glided. What we mean is something like, let's say an example of and a palatalized consonant like alya, we hear it as ailya. So I is the one which is off-glided. We have some examples for you. Consonant insertion takes place when a consonant is inserted usually between two vowels. This is one of the alternative strategies to repair a violation of a restriction in languages according to which two vowels cannot co-occur adjacent to each other. When this happens, we saw that there can be the deletion of a vowel. We looked at deletion of vowel in the last module. Another alternative is the insertion of a consonant between two vowels in order to avoid the occurrence of two vowels together. This is one of the conditions, one of the contexts in which consonant insertion takes place. Let's look at the examples. Thus we notice that in Kashmiri, a ya or a wa is inserted before different vowels, and sometimes even a consonant such as ma is inserted between vowels. For example, we find here when we get pe plus e, we get a ya inserted there as pe yi. Che plus an, we hear che wan, and words such as di plus ao becomes di mao. So these are interesting examples of consonant insertion, mainly to avoid the occurrence of two vowels adjacent. We next turn to the Laryngeal types of modification processes. In an earlier module, we looked at the various types of the states that the glottis takes. Those are the sounds which can be called laryngeal types. For example, voiced sounds, voiceless sounds, creaky sounds, aspirated sounds, etc. All these are different types of glottal states, and when we talk about laryngeal types of modifications, they involve processes such as voicing, devoicing, aspiration, de-aspiration, etc. Let's take a look at some of these processes with examples. Debucalization Debucalization is a process where a consonant changes to a glottal stop. In many languages, especially Tibeto-Burman languages, we have consonants such as p, t, k changing to a glottal stop. Some examples of debucalization are given on the screen. Glottalization. Glottalization takes place when a consonant has a glottal release. Please take a note of the fact that when a consonant changes to a glottal stop, it is not glottalization, but it is called debucalization. Glottalization is, to repeat, when a consonant has a glottal release. In many languages, especially of India, glottalization is a commonly found process. For example, pre-glottalization is the opposite of glottalization, where a vowel or a consonant begins with a glottal stop. For example, in Assamese, words do not begin with the vowel without being glottalized. A word such as Assam, which is Ahom, pronounced as Ahom. Given any word beginning with a vowel, it is pre-glottalized. Pre-glottalization is also a commonly known phenomenon in some varieties of English. For example, Cockney English is distinguished from Standard English because of the predominance of the process of pre-glottalization in words before voiceless obstruent consonants such as p, t, k and ch. Laryngealization. Laryngealization takes place when there is audible creaky sound in the vocal cords. Now, laryngealization is generally found to be accompanied by sometimes very low tones in tonal languages. For example, in Thai, a syllable said with a low tone is produced with a creaky voice. For example, in Thai, a syllable said with a low tone is produced with a creaky sound. Aspiration, a very commonly known phenomenon and well discussed in the literature, is aspiration. Typically, aspiration takes place when there is extra breath in the production of a consonant. Acoustically, we have seen that aspiration is usually accompanied by delayed voice onset time. In many languages, voiceless consonants tend to be aspirated in certain positions which are considered to be favorable for aspiration. De-aspiration, the opposite of aspiration. In many languages, aspirated consonants lose their aspiration in some restricted context. For example, in Assamese, aspiration is lost before another consonant. The examples are given. Devoicing, as the name suggests, is the loss of voice. Usually it's found restricted to contexts such as word final position, as in German and Dutch, or before another voiceless consonant. Just like devoicing, voicing is also a commonly occurring phenomenon. Usually it is found to occur before voiced consonants or in the context of surrounding voiced consonants, typically two vowels. For example, in Malayalam, voiceless consonants such as p, t, k are pronounced as voiced consonants between two vowels or after nasals, such as sita is pronounced sida, and words with p and a k between two vowels similarly become b and g. And similarly, after nasals, also in Malayalam, the voiceless plosives are pronounced as voiced plosives. And this is especially found in loan words. So English loan words with voiceless consonants after nasals are heard pronounced as voiced, and thus the process is easily noticed. Breathy voice or murmuring takes place when the vocal cords are held in the position of a voice sounds but with a little extra opening, typically found for voiced aspirated plosives and also for certain vowels which occur adjacent to them. The normal way to represent murmured or breathy sounds is either with an superscript H with a hook or with two dots below the symbol. Vowels are usually represented with two dots below them. For example, Hindi, Gujarati, and many other Indo-Aryan languages are known for murmured sounds or for breathy voiced sounds. Now we turn to processes that are called syllable-based processes. A large number of processes found in world languages are based on syllable structure. Before we turn to these processes, it is necessary to understand what a syllable is. A syllable is a unit of sound that is higher than a segment and that groups segments into articulatory units. Given a word such as America, we have about 7 segments: a, m, a, r, e, and ka. So if we want to see whether a segment that occurs between two segments is close to one or the other, there is no way to find out if we restrict ourselves only to the segment level. But when we look at how the word is organized into syllables, then it is easy to see which segments come closer to each other. For example, the word America is divided into a, me, ri, and ka, 4 syllables. When we look at the consonant ma and see that it occurs in the syllable me, we know that ma is closer to a than to a. So a syllable is a device, an articulatory device of grouping consonants together in articulating words and longer stretches. A syllable has a typical structure, a tripartite structure, namely onset, nucleus, and coda, earlier called onset, peak, and coda. Some examples of the structure of syllables are given on the screen. So the examples are from English. We have words such as a, go, got, on, product, with different types of onset, nucleus, coda structures. Syllabification is the process whereby segments are gathered together into syllables. There are general, universal criteria of syllabification. For example, the first consonant goes with the following vowel, the last consonant goes with the preceding vowel. Between two vowels, a consonant goes with the following vowel. When we have a sequence of 2 consonants, then there is a division between them, etc. Apart from these, languages also have their specific restrictions on the syllable divisions. We will look at them in greater detail in module 24. For now, we consider that the general introduction to syllable helps us to understand how this can be seen as a basis for some of the processes we are going to discuss. Vowel insertion. We have looked at insertion as a process, but now we see how it can be seen as a syllable-based process. In many languages, if there are certain sequences such as two consonants occurring, and if they are not permitted in the language, then we see a vowel inserted between them, because the syllable structure does not allow two consonants to co-occur. For example, in English, when we get a word with two consonants such as sk or spur, some of the Indic languages that do not allow these two consonants to occur at the beginning of words find different ways of inserting a vowel between them. Thus, if you say is cool, then you avoid having two consonants at the beginning, or when you say sir cool, then also you avoid having two consonants at the beginning. Thus, the insertion of a vowel is in order to avoid a certain syllable structure and to turn it into a syllable structure that is acceptable in the language. The other process is vowel deletion, which also is dependent on syllable structure. We have discussed this process in relation to deletion. For example, we find that in some languages a sequence of two vowels is not permitted. Then one of the vowels may be dropped. We also find that sometimes vowels are deleted if the syllable is weak, that is, if it is not stressed, if it's in a weak position. For example, in a language such as Hindi, we often come across the vowel to be dropped when it is not stressed. When it is stressed, it is kept. For example, mahatva or mahatta. But when it is not stressed, then it is deleted. For example, kamala becomes kamla, because occurs in the syllable which is not stressed. We have examples from Tamil where we find that two vowels are not allowed to occur when, because of word formation, a morpheme ends in a vowel and the next morpheme begins with a vowel. We have the possibility of two vowels coming together. In such a situation, in Tamil, one of the vowels, the following vowel, is deleted. The examples are given on the screen. A very important type of modification process is termed as articulatory process. The articulatory processes that we are going to discuss are considered to be articulatory because they involve some kind of articulatory strength. So these processes have to deal with the articulation being stronger or the articulation being weaker in producing sounds. These are mainly of two types. One is known as fortition type, in which there is greater articulatory strength involved, and the other is of Lineation type, where the articulatory strength is lessened or decreased. It is the Lineation type processes which are more commonly discussed in the literature, but we also have fortition type processes to discuss. There are three main angles from which these processes are discussed. One is sonority, the other is articulatory ease, and the third is the obstruction in the vocal tract. The sonority is one of the most interesting aspects related to syllable structure. Thus, phonologists have proposed a scale of sonority. Sounds are seen to be either rising in that scale or falling in that scale. What we have before you are classes of sounds which are rising in scale, starting from geminate consonants and going on to vowels. The Lineation processes are also seen as processes which involve articulatory ease. That means they are easier to articulate, and that is why they are found in world languages. The main types of fortition processes that we come across in the literature are 5 discussed here, namely germination, lengthening, tensing, aspiration, and occlusion. We take a look at them one by one. Germination is the process whereby a single consonant is pronounced for a distinctly longer period of time. For example, in Hindi we have a process whereby a consonant before a r, a l, v or y is lengthened or geminated. For example, satya is satya, sabhya is sabhya, vidva is vidva. Thus we get satya, sabhyata, vidwan, etc. Given any consonant followed by a r, l, v, y, in Hindi the consonant is germinated. In Tamil there is a germination process widely found in those complex words where the stem is followed by an oo vowel which is added to it. In such a case, the consonant before oo is germinated. For example, we have here on the screen words such as kappu or bassu or pallu or mullu, etc. Lengthening is the process whereby a vowel is pronounced for a distinctly longer period of time. Normally, lengthening is considered to be a fortition process because it is associated with fortition processes such as stress. For example, in a language such as Hungarian, only a long vowel can be stressed. In many languages, if there is stress, then it is accompanied by the lengthening of vowels. Related to lengthening is the process well known in historical change studies, namely compensatory lengthening. By compensatory lengthening, what is meant is when a segment is lost, then its adjacent segment is lengthened. Thus, we find in the development of Indo-Aryan languages examples such as Chandra becoming Chand because n or a r is dropped, so the preceding vowel becomes long. We have some other examples such as hasta. Now, because sa and ta are substituted by a single consonant tha, then a becomes a, such as hath. These changes are common from Middle Indo-Aryan to Modern Indo-Aryan. We have before us some interesting examples of lengthening in a Tehrani variety of Persian. In Tehrani Persian, what we noticed is that when a glottal stop is dropped, it leads to lengthening of a vowel. The glottal stop may be before or after a consonant. Look at the examples on the screen. Tensing is the process whereby sounds, consonants and vowels have more tense articulation in some contexts. In a Tibeto-Burman language such as Dimasa, when vowels e, u, a, o occur at the end of words, then they are pronounced tense compared to vowels when they occur in the middle of words. Thus, we have examples to show the tensing process at the end of words in Dimasa. Notice the use of symbols. The difference in the symbols for tense and lax vowels, which is commonly practiced in phonemic descriptions. Aspiration. We have looked at aspiration earlier on. What we notice about aspiration in relation to fortition is that usually it takes place where only stronger processes, stronger articulation is involved, such as stressed syllable. We have discussed aspiration in English several times over, and we know the context in which aspiration takes place. It is the stressed syllable initial position when not preceded by sir. Another set of examples which shows that aspiration is a strengthening fortition process is in dimasa. In dimasa, what we find is when voiceless plosives occur at the beginning of words, then they are aspirated. They are not aspirated in any other context. The examples are given on the screen. The last of the fortition processes is occlusion. We have already discussed it earlier on in this module. So we move on to the lineation processes. The lineation processes are those which involve a weakening in articulatory strength. These processes are degermination, vowel shortening, deaspiration, spirantization, voicing, devoicing, vowel reduction, spirantization, and approximatization, among others. Recall that some of these processes have been discussed under other heads. We take a look at them again here as instances of lineation processes. Degermination. Degermination takes place when a sequence of consonants or two consonants are pronounced with the time period of a single consonant. Some examples are from the Dravidian language Konda, when because of word formation two consonants come together, that is, a morpheme ends with a consonant and the next morpheme begins with a consonant, then in place of the two consonants we have a single consonant. For example, so lok plus ku, lokku is pronounced as loku. As plus z, asi is pronounced asi, etc. Vowel shortening. As a lineation process, it involves a long vowel to be produced as a short vowel. Typically, this process is found to occur in those positions where the segment is weak, such as an unstressed syllable. For example, in Hindi, we find that if a long vowel occurs before another long vowel which is stressed, then this unstressed long vowel is pronounced as a short vowel. Examples are words such as bimar or bimari. When ma is stressed, we hear it as bimari. Or words such as salana, which means yearly, is also heard as salana. Because la is stressed, so sa is shortened. So shortening typically is a lineation process. That is, it occurs in weaker syllables. Deaspiration involves the loss of aspiration in certain contexts. We have looked at this process in relation to the data in Assamese. The processes of spirantization, voicing and devoicing as lineation processes have also been discussed in relation to the laryngeal type of modification processes. We thus only give examples of these processes here. Vowel reduction. A very commonly found phenomenon in world languages is the reduction of full vowels to a schwa. This takes place when a vowel is unstressed. For example, in English we notice this phenomenon occurring very commonly. In a word such as photo, if fo is stressed, we hear the vowel fo. When the next syllable is stressed, such as photography, then o becomes photography. If we say photograph, the graph is stressed, we hear a full vowel ah. But when toy is stressed, when you say photography, then ah is reduced to a. Thus, we find that vowel reduction usually takes place in unstressed syllables and is thus a very good example of a lineation process. Approximatization has again been discussed before. We next turn to an interesting process known as neutralization. We will find occasion to discuss neutralization processes in much greater detail later on. For now, it is sufficient to see that the neutralization process involves the loss of distinction between two sounds in either given context or in all contexts. Now this takes place typically in contexts that involve weak articulation. For example, end of words. Thus, in many Indo-Aryan languages, unlike in Dravidian languages, short vowels at the end of words are pronounced long. Thus, the difference between short and long vowels at the end of words is lost. For example, in Hindi, most words with short vowels are pronounced long, even in standard varieties, such as, for example, atithi, a Sanskritized pronunciation or a very formal pronunciation of the Hindi word meaning guest is pronounced as atithi, or aditi is the name of a person, a woman, is pronounced as aditi. Apitu, which means but, is pronounced apitu. Now the phenomenon thus has led to a loss of distinction between long and short vowels at the end of words. We here are concerned mainly with the neutralization types that occur in only given context. When the context is spread to the entire system, then there is a change in the language, and normally only one of the contrasts, one of the sounds remains in the language. To summarize, in this module we continued with the discussion of modification type processes such as laryngeal types, transition types, syllable-based types, and articulatory type of processes. Essentially, we have gone into great length, even at the risk of overlapping the discussion of them, mainly because we have been concerned with two things. One, to be able to identify a process, and the other, to be able to relate it to an explanatory angle. That is, it is possible for us to see that there is a process such as voicing, which is essentially a laryngeal type process. It involves a modification in the production at the larynx. But voicing can also be seen as a lineation type processes. That is, it involves lineation, weakening. It typically occurs in those contexts where it is easier to pronounce the sounds as voiced sounds. I hope you will have the occasion to go through the discussion again and develop a good understanding of these processes. Thank you.